Hello and welcome to I Care, I Volunteer, the show that brings to you the issues that concern our communities. Before we start, let me introduce you to Volunteer MBC, your local volunteer center serving the cities of Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. Volunteer MBC helps to connect volunteers in Peel to meaningful opportunities in the Peel region. So if you are looking for a volunteer opportunity, log on to volunteermbc.org to ensure that you receive a meaningful volunteer opportunity. Volunteer MBC offers many learning opportunities via its Learning Center for volunteer engagement professionals, board members, and volunteers of all ages. Studies show that despite enormous social, cultural, and legislative change in Ontario, in recent decades, many from the LGBTQ+ community still face discrimination. While data exists to describe LGBTQ+ inclusion in employment, no data is available to describe LGBTQ+ inclusion in volunteerism. And just as volunteerism is a means to contribute to society, it also nurtures community connections, strengthens social networks, skill development, and increased self-esteem, among other benefits for the LGBTQ+ volunteers. Recently, Minister Albanese made the historic funding announcement for the Pride in Volunteering program, which is a key partnership between Volunteer MBC and Peel HIV/AIDS Network, focused on creating an increased understanding of the unique barriers and challenges faced by current and prospective LGBTQ+ volunteers. This partnership will develop appropriate strategies based on volunteer engagement, best practices to increase a sense of inclusion for the LGBTQ+ communities with not-for-profit organizations. To discuss this in detail, we have with us Volunteer MBC's Executive Director Karine Strong, Peel HIV/AIDS Network's Executive Director Phillips Banks, and Ziva from Peel HIV/AIDS Network. Welcome to I Care, I Volunteer. Hello guys, how are you guys today? Are you excited to be here?
Yes.
Yeah? Always excited. That's what I like to hear. So we're going to get right into this today. Congratulations for receiving your grant. But tell us something about the program and how did this partnership come about?
Do you want me to take
Sure,
that one,
yeah,
Philip?
take that
So, Volunteer MBC is actually a partner organization. We have the same home. We're both part of Community Door, and we collaborate on a number of other initiatives. And I've always felt really passionate about offering inclusive volunteer opportunities, and so we target different communities, individuals with disabilities, individuals that are new to the country and often face barriers that are more cultural related. And so this was a perfect opportunity to try and really engage this community that has incredible skill sets to offer in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. So are there any studies done to investigate the inclusion of
LGBT volunteers? Well, we've searched high and low, and we can't find anything. So we feel like this is probably a pretty innovative project. But what I think there is a lot of information around is the experience of LGBT individuals. So I think just anecdotally, when we talk to LGBT individuals, members of the LGBT community, and ask them about choices they make when it comes to volunteering, people clearly identify that they want to be able to volunteer someplace that acknowledges them, recognizes them as a whole person, and that includes their sexuality or their gender orientation.
Mm-hmm. So kind of in relation to that, do you guys have any insight about the difficulties that people of the LGBTQ+ community face in volunteering?
For sure. So, I mean, we can both probably talk about this. So, I identify as a gay guy, and I've been out since I was a teenager, and I volunteered all my life. So, it's a big part of my life. So, definitely, I think the experience of being a volunteer in an environment where there may be, negative attitudes or values, beliefs held by people around homosexuality, sexual orientations that aren't heterosexual, I think really affect my desire to be there, right? I don't feel welcome, I don't feel included, and sometimes it actually can feel hostile. So absolutely, from my own experience, I can say that I have always chosen to volunteer in places when I can that are going to acknowledge me, and even better if they celebrate.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And what about you?
Well, I mean, it's like a similar experience. It's not that way. I mean, like I work in a different context. I'm a Syrian trans woman also. I arrived here like 4 months ago, so like most of my volunteering experience is back in Syria. So you can see that.
Welcome
yeah.
to Canada.
Thank you. So yeah, but speaking of the volunteering, I can relate. Like maybe it's like a different level, like of how much like could be discriminated or something. It's like it was always like we're talking like my will to volunteer and work in this sector versus like how much I had to take to be in this sector. Like so it was like yeah. I mean, I had to oppress. I had to be misgendered and ignore it. I had to go through a lot of things. Like they had to like certain places I was not allowed to go to. Certain places I had to go to. It's like a safety issues. It's like it was all of this like thing that you had to go through. Like you had to bear with all of these things. And it's a community that completely does not acknowledge you. That's like another story. But like, so this is what it comes like. The importance of like being celebrated or being acknowledged as a queer person in what you're doing, because some of us want to really do this job. They want to help, and it's important for us to do this job. Like we're a demographic. We have to be presented in the community's service work, because there are like people like us that we're going to be serving. So yeah, but that comes to the whole point of this, like LGBT inclusion, that we want to do this, but we have to be appreciated, we have to be included, so we can be able to do this and not run away from this thing.
Yeah, especially and do it to the best of your ability, right?
Yeah.
That is some great answers. We're going to get right into that a little bit more deeper with your partnership. Don't go anywhere. Stay right here on I Care, I Volunteer on Rogers TV. Welcome back to I Care, I Volunteer. I'm your host, Taylor Lewis, alongside Karine, Philip, and Ziva. So we were talking a little bit before the break about your partnership. Now we're going to get into more detail about those things. How can we address the shortcomings that are lacking in the not-for-profit sector?
Yeah, so I think it has to start with acknowledgement. So I think particularly in an area like Peel, which has, I think, long been seen as suburban, and where often maybe the perception is that things like LGBT communities exist in Toronto, but not here. And so we're at a point where I think there's been a really low level of visibility of LGBT communities, though there are thousands and thousands and thousands of LGBT folks living in the region. So I think it starts by acknowledging. And I think this is one of the really important aspects of this project, is that we're saying in Peel, LGBT people exist, they want to contribute, they have the right to contribute, and organizations, I think, have an obligation to welcome LGBT folks in to contribute as active community members and to be part of the fabric of Peel. So I think that's one of the really important aspects. Beyond that, I think what we see is organizations in Peel not necessarily understanding how to work with LGBT folks. And in some cases, it comes down to language, simple language. There's different terminologies, and acknowledging that terminologies change, right? So there are terms that are maybe a bit outdated, and then there's some more contemporary terms, and I think people are sometimes uncomfortable about like, what language do I even use? And so that can be a barrier. So for us, I think it's about organizations saying, we want to do this work. We'll start with understanding how to talk about the issues and about the people, right? How to talk about us. And then from there, we'll look at what are some of the barriers that may exist in our organizations for welcoming LGBT folks into the organization. So that's a process. And so I think a big part of it for us is training, and then helping people with policies and procedures, internal stuff, right? But in some cases, it also just comes with changing some of the mindset. So we did an LGBT training not too long ago, last week, in an organization in Peel. And some of the feedback we got back afterwards was staff just hadn't thought about this, right? They just hadn't thought about what they were doing or not doing to acknowledge the existence and the presence of LGBT folks in their organizations, either as staff, as clients, or as volunteers.
Yeah. So, Karine, what is the direct involvement that Volunteer MBC has with PLHIV?
So for this particular project, we'll take on the volunteer management component to really make sure that we put all the tools in place that are welcoming based on national occupational standards, based on the CCVI code, to make sure that volunteers are welcome, including the youth, because I think, you know, they're often already facing a barrier because of being so young, and the organization saying, I can't, you know, engage them. And then, you know, there's the added element. So we're really hoping it's a huge untapped resource that, you know, if the LGBTQ community feels comfortable, they can do a lot. And as far as helping, you know, very short-resourced organizations in PL. So that's going to be our main focus, to make sure that we have tools that are going to last, not just for Peel organizations, but we also have Ontario Health, Rainbow Health involved. We also have the Ontario Volunteer Centre Network involved. So the idea is that we're really going to be able to share these tools.
Mm-hmm. So how will you guys make sure that the policies you create will help the LGBTQ community?
So part of that is creating an audit process to make sure that we put them through an audit to identify whether they are indeed using the policies, to what extent, and all those things. And the great thing is that because of this project, that training is offered for free, because that's often another challenge in our nonprofit world, is that opportunities for professional development are far and few between because there's just no budgets for it.
Mm-hmm. And will you create a volunteer management model specific to this community?
It's not going to be specific. It's going to have that LGBTQ lens on top of
Yeah.
it. So a few years ago, the Canadian Code for Volunteer Engagement underwent some changes, the standards, and looked at it with a cultural lens. So that's in place. So this would now be to really include and lay that LGBTQ lens over top.
All right, perfect. I have a quick question for you, Ziva. So you said you came from Syria. Now, what is your role as a volunteer with PLHIV/AIDS? Like, what are some things that you take part in?
Well, I mean, most of my volunteer part is like doing it. PLHIV, it's not an LGBT organization, so like yeah. But most of my work is LGBT related somehow. But yeah, that's a part I volunteer in. Sure, any other part is gonna be an interest of mine. But yeah, basically, it's something new for me. But I'm really excited about doing. I've been doing humanitarian work, but yeah.
Yeah. So what are you looking forward to most coming up?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, like, definitely as I'm working on LGBT work, it's like better LGBT world, you know, like,
yeah.
Exactly, like better inclusion, better everything for, you know, for our folks.
Yeah, making a change for the community, exactly. And that's a really good partnership. I definitely love this topic for sure. So we're going to get into more detail about your partnership and things that you guys are doing in the future. Coming up after the break, don't go anywhere. Stay tuned here on I Care, I Volunteer.